Principal Matters Podcast, episode 508. This is Will Parker and Jen Schwanke back for another episode of Principal Matters, the school leaders podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. Jen, we've been recording batches in the summer, and I'm so excited for listeners to get to meet Dina Langston and Stacey James. They're a team that I met when I was doing some PD in Florida. It's going to be a great conversation for practicing school leaders. So I know that folks are going to enjoy that conversation, but we usually open the show with a Q&A. And you had recently come across a wonderful PD that a friend of yours was doing. And so we thought we'd talk about how can principals discover their teachers' unique professional work languages. So take us there.
Yeah, so this isn't a Q&A so much as a really fantastic idea to start the school year. And so this is my colleague, Samantha. She did this really neat activity actually with school leaders on her team, but it could absolutely apply to a staff. So here's what she did. She created a Google slide deck, and she had everybody add a slide for themselves, and they could do anything that they wanted with the background. And then she had a template with 6 pieces of information that would help her lead them. So here's what these 6 pieces of information are. Right. My leadership style in 3 words. My best working environment, what appreciative feedback looks like to me, my early warning sign, when things aren't going to go well, how do I know, my genius zone, and my learning zone. And I am here to tell you the answers that her team gave, they were funny, they were helpful, they were detailed. For example, one person's early warning sign was, I get real quiet. Another person's early warning sign was, I am overthinking. The what appreciative feedback looks like to me, some people said, I love a note. Some people said, I love hearing appreciative words. Some said, I like the acts of service. I want you to do something for me. And it was fantastic because when I saw this, I thought as a leader, I would reference this. I would use this as a way to get to know my staff. So fun idea, super quick, certain to add a little bit of humor and levity to the opening staff meeting.
Well, Jen, I'm going to ask you to just paste those into our notes so we can share those with listeners. But I'm going to read them out loud again. So number 1, and you correct me if I'm wrong, how would you describe your leadership style in 3 words? 2, what are your best working conditions? How would you describe that? 3, what does appreciation feel like for you? 4, how do you communicate early warning signs when you need help? 5, what would you say is your genius zone? Man, I love that question. And 6, what was the 6th one?
The 6th one was
my learning zone.
My learning zone, exactly.
What does my learning zone look like? Wow. Oh, I can't wait to use those.
I'm
going to use them. So I'm already thinking about, I'm so excited now to start my new year of training and coaching with school leaders, because what a wonderful way to just get really deep with each other and understanding who, not just yourself, but also the people with whom you're working.
Right. Well, and Will, I have a rule where typically I don't speak about anyone within my own organization. I try not to, but this was so good. And Samantha did such a great job leading it. So a great activity and would be super fun. And you get something out of it because you learn about your people.
Oh, okay, listeners. We'll check back to the show notes for today's show to see those 6 takeaways. Jen, how can our listeners stay connected with you over the summer?
Yep. Find me at jenschwanke.com.
And you can find all of today's resources at williamdparker.com or at our other address, principalmatterspodcast.com. I know you're going to love today's conversation with our guests. And until next time, thanks for doing what matters. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Everyone talks about the power of data-driven instruction, but what does that actually look like? Look no further than iExcel, the ultimate online learning and teaching platform for K-12. iExcel gives you meaningful insights that drive real progress, and research can prove it. Studies in nearly all 50 states across the U.S. show that schools that use iExcel outperform other schools on state tests. Educators who use iExcel love that they can easily see how their schools are performing in real time to make better instructional decisions. And iExcel doesn't stop at just data. iExcel also brings an entire ecosystem of resources for your teachers with a complete curriculum, personalized learning plans, and so much more. It's no wonder that IXL is used in 95 of the top 100 school districts. Ready to join them? Visit ixl.com/PM to get started. Support for Principal Matters comes from DigiCoach and its walkthrough tool. I want you to picture walking through classrooms, observing teachers and students. In just 10 minutes, you'd hope to see good instructional strategies and student learning taking place. Or maybe you have questions about something missing from instructional planning. Instead of taking 30 minutes to write a follow-up email or leaving your teacher unsupported, wouldn't it be great to have an app on your phone or tablet where you could send immediate feedback while also collecting data? Enter DigiCoach, customizable walkthrough and coaching tool created by school leaders for school leaders with thousands of pre-written research-based accommodations and coaching tips, empowering you to provide quick, actionable feedback. DigiCoach is not an evaluation tool. Instead, it's an easy-to-use feedback and coaching tool, an efficient way to store your notes and collect data for improving student outcomes right in your hands. It can be used on iPhone, Android, or tablets and includes speech-to-text functions. Make the most of your walkthroughs with a tool that saves you time and enhances meaningful feedback to your teachers. Go to digicoach.com to learn more, and please tell them Principal Matters recommended you check them out. That's digicoach.com.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. And this week, we're going to be talking about rigor, routines, and relationships with my special guests, Dina Langston and Stacey James. Stacey James and Dina Langston are experienced educational leaders from Armwood High School in Hillsborough County, Florida. Stacey currently serves as Magnet Lead at Armwood High School and has held this role for several years, leading school-wide efforts to align rigor, routines, and relationships to support instructional improvement and student success. With over 17 years in education, she has previously served as a classroom teacher, AVID coordinator, and instructional coach. She also has more than 5 years of experience as an AVID staff developer, facilitating professional learning for educators at AVID Summer Institutes and national conferences. Dina Langston serves as principal of Armwood High School, where she leads efforts to improve instructional quality, school culture, and student outcomes through aligned systems and collaborative leadership. Her work has contributed to significant school improvement, increased graduation rates, and academic performance. In recognition of her leadership and impact on student achievement, she was awarded the 2026 Principal Leadership Award from Florida Tax Watch. Together, Stacey James and Dina Langston design and deliver professional learning grounded in real school context and focused on sustainable improvement for educators and students. I know that was a mouthful for an intro, but Stacey, Dina, welcome to Principal Matters Podcast. Why don't you fill in the gaps on that intro and tell listeners something else they may be surprised to know about you. And Dina, why don't you go first?
Oh gosh. Okay. A surprise to know. I would say I think one of the greatest things is that I just love the things that are outside of instruction. I actually enjoy that just as much. Watching our kids in, rifles and ROTC, our athletic programs. I bring just as much joy in that side of things as the classroom and leading that in instruction.
Yeah, that's why you make a great high school principal. Stacey, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I've wanted to be a teacher since I was in the third grade. So I just love everything about being at school and I've been at Armwood for 15 years now. So just being a part of every year growing and it being different and just being so proud of everything that we're doing.
Well, you guys should be proud. So let me set some context for listeners, because back in January, I had the opportunity to come present at the SAMS National Conference in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And there were hundreds of principals and teachers and educators and SAMs there, assistants to principals. Because I love to learn, I went to your session and it was just so invigorating, where you guys were focusing on what we're going to talk about in today's context: rigor, routines, and relationships. So I want to set some context, because now I also want to let listeners know this is the day recording this, the day before your spring break. And so you guys also are just like so generous to jump in this conversation with me. But Dina, for listeners hearing this for the first time, can you walk them through what you call your triple R framework?
So when I got here, we were in COVID, right? So it was really difficult. It was very unusual times, fragile times. And our school was not at where the district wanted it to be. And so obviously that's based on test scores, but you're in COVID, so we weren't testing. So it was really important to kind of figure it out. And I couldn't build relationships because you couldn't get together, you couldn't gather, you couldn't meet. So it was a very unique time to enter into a school. And so I had to figure out something and figure out something quickly. So working through the process, we also know that every year the district gives you some initiatives, gives you something that you need to roll out, and you find out in your principal's leadership, which is 2 weeks before you do pre-planning, and you've already established your pre-planning. So that's the reality of what we live every summer. But I knew that we had to get to some consistency. We were also a large school. So we're about 2,200 kids. We're about 147 teachers. By the time you put non-instructional staff in there, we're about 192. And so it was a matter of, were we in a place of rigor? Because that was the buzzword in the time. And then realizing kids were coming in and out, routines were going to be important. And as well, so were relationships, because that was going to look really different than where we were before. So with all of those things, it was just really important for us to work through an unusual time and then keep it simple. And so going through where my brain goes of just like, here's where we need to go. This is a focus. Stacey is my brain dump partner, right? I'm like, okay, I'm dumping right here. Now help me get my brain organized so that this makes sense to everybody else. And we kind of were like, okay, rigor, routines, relationships, that makes sense. Like those are real worlds that any teacher can walk in. And whether you are a non-educator coming into education for the first time, right? Because we were in a shortage on top of it, they can figure out at least routines, relationships. Now we needed to work on rigor. And so we just really stayed right there. And then every year we started to provide teacher clarity about what that meant and with where we were. And so we're on year 5 and we're still in rigor, routines, and relationships. That's our model of instruction. So even though our district has shifted into Marzano, it still fits. And so I just think keeping it simple, not having those new initiatives, but just providing more clarity. So I might sneak an initiative in there, but they don't really know it's an initiative in there, right? It's just providing teacher clarity or leveling up the expectation of one of those levers. And so I feel like that's where we really started to see systemic growth. It wasn't we were having a magic pill. It wasn't like, oh, we ripped the Band-Aid off and we tried this brand new thing. This was our new adventure, our new initiative. No, we were meeting teachers where they were and growing them where they were. And so that's why I feel like this Triple R framework, it doesn't matter where your staff is, it works.
What I love about that is, sorry, listeners listen to me tell stories all the time. I grew up on a farm, and when you grow up in a place like that, if you go visit other farms, you can tell if it's a flourishing farm or if it's a small farm or it's a struggling place. You guys, when I was sitting in the room with you and you were just sharing the feedback from that journey, and I realized that with 2,300 kids and 192 staff, you had taken the graduation rate from that school up to, at the time, like somewhere around 94%. You took your school score across the state, its student grade, up to, at the time, a B. But while I was listening to you, the framework that you guys have really committed to of rigor, routines, and relationships have driven almost everything you've done, even though in 2 minutes it's impossible to tell a 5-year journey. But I want to stay on that framework because I just think it's so powerful for anyone else listening to think about how it might apply to their work, to their school, to their environment that they want to be flourishing to. So Stacey, when you first encountered this framework, what stood out to you? What was this journey like for you as a teacher leader?
Yeah, so at the time when Miss Langston came in, I was in the classroom as the AVID coordinator, and I was also overseeing school improvement. And every year during pre-planning on that Tuesday, we had a data day, and the expectation was to spend a good 4 hours digging into data and going over instruction. And every year, teachers just felt like there wasn't anything to ground them in the work. It was just all like, we're doing this because we have to do this. And so when we came up with the Triple R framework, it became easier. Again, like, we're going to just keep saying teacher clarity, right? Because it made sense to them that everything was going to fall under one of those 3 R's. And so everything that we did, it just made sense to stay with that framework. And so teachers felt like they had an understanding of how all of the things were coming together, but how they each like fit into their separate categories. So it really just helped with teacher clarity in terms of like school improvement efforts, instructional efforts, so that they could really focus in on what matters most, and that was working with students and helping students be successful.
So let me slow down myself here. And sometimes I like to go off script from things that I've thought through before. Let's take a minute. And I just want to give listeners the opportunity to hear you say a little bit about each of those categories. And I might ask you guys to take turns, but let's take relationships first. Dina, I know that I think you grew up in Philly. You have a background. You love great Italian food. Talk about how relationships was such an important part of that R for you before we even talk about rigor and routines.
So obviously, coming into a school during those unique times, I felt like it was important to build relationships. And I would say my reputation was very uncomfortable for some because I have a very direct approach. So that doesn't work for everyone. But I needed to understand that it came out of love and it came out of support. And so in order for me to build relationships, I started cooking. And I started cooking for the faculty. So cooking for 200 people, I was back in that kitchen, but then I was establishing relationships with the lunch ladies, and we were trying to like steal my recipes, right? But we started playing music in the back and laughing. And then when people started to see, not only did I cook, I served. And I got to have conversations with them, and they knew that was a lot of work, but for me being Italian, right, we grew up around the table, and how could I get into some other conversations with them of just who they were, but just letting them know how much they meant to me, that I was going to take the time to stop my day, cook, serve, make sure that they had everything they wanted as if they were part of my family. I think really started to shape the dynamics of relationships of, yes, I have an expectation. I'm not coming off of that. But with that comes love, comes support, comes caring. I care who you are as a person, because without that, we're not going to get to the same place. So I think that was really important, so that when I shifted into data dives, and the data dives with Dina that everybody wanted to talk about, yes, it was still scary, but it was all about, what barrier do you have? Is the barrier about a kid and their attendance? Is the barrier that you needed whiteboards to flash up for kids? What is that barrier? What can I take down? So once they realized this wasn't a gotcha, that was another place that I was able to establish really strong instructional relationships about those things. But what I learned from my cooking and my serving might have been that they were a Mets fan, might have been that they were from another part of town, so that when I was running down a hallway, I could say, "Did you see your team lose last night to my Philly?" Like, I could have those funny conversations with them. Because even this morning with the baseball classic going on, one of my teachers came running into my office. Are you ready to run? Just having that fun conversation. But I modeled that for the teachers. I embraced that. So then when teachers saw me hugging kids, talking with kids, because even though it was COVID, I could not touch, I could not hug. Eventually I had to get there. That just became a way of work. Good morning. How are you? How's it going today? So that relationship piece was critical. So we could talk about instruction all day, but no one's going to trust you or be willing to take a risk if they don't trust that every time you meet with them, it's not a gotcha.
I'm so glad we started there. And just for principals listening, I just think it's so important to realize the unique individual traits you bring to your work, just like you did in the classroom. And your campus is your classroom. And so you knew first you've got to gain trust before you start making change. And so, Stacey, let's talk a little bit about routines, because predictable behaviors for learning, as you guys describe your routines, means teaching new teachers. It means establishing what the practices are going to be. What does that look like for you guys in some practical ways to bridge that gap so that those routines become something that's consistent across your school?
Yeah, so when we sat down and we just laid out everything that happens, everything that principals are responsible for, everything that the student services guidance team is responsible for, everything student affairs is responsible for, just when we laid it all out, we realized again that we needed to unify everything and have systems in place. So when we were able to bring back the same admin team and have consistency in student affairs, we were able to all get on the same page in what our non-negotiables are, school-wide efforts, school-wide policies, bringing in teachers and student voices into that work as well. We were able to align our systems for our MTSS RTI process. So now all of our counselors and student success coaches, they were all following the same routine. So like every Thursday, second and third period, we're meeting for MTSS and we're going over the ABCs, attendance, behavior, course grades. And so then when teachers realized that we were creating systems on our side of the house, then they felt more comfortable because then they knew who to go to and for what, and then they knew we were going to follow up. So they trusted in the processes that were happening while they were in their classrooms teaching. Outside of the classroom, we're taking care of all the other things that, so they didn't have to worry about it. They knew they could just focus on teaching and that we were going to hold students and everyone on the campus accountable, and we were going to do it through having established routines.
I think one of the other pieces to piggyback on is I started as an elementary ed, and then I went into junior high, high school, back to middle, back to high school. And, I remember being in high school and the lunch bell rings and everybody just gets in the lunch line. It's like the food court, right? It just naturally happens. But in middle school, that's never going to happen. And in elementary school, right? That's never going to happen. I realized how important procedures were when I went from high school into middle school and saw a lack of implementation of procedures. I was like, what's the procedure for that? What do you mean? Okay, we have to have a procedure. So then when I came back from middle school to high school, I realized that was a huge gap. And so when I brought that back from my middle school experiences to say, what's the procedure for how we enter the building? What do you mean? We have 17 entrances and exits. That's not how we're going to enter. We could never cover that, monitor that. What's the routine for instruction? So we all talked about behavioral instructions and behavioral routines, but then we missed instructional routines. So once then we started to build back, we went back to old Harry Wong.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, yeah, we went back to Harry Wong, right? So I had one of my very, very seasoned teachers come in and work with one of my APs on, there was a reason why he was successful. And then we realized that was how we also realized we missed an instructional routine and the importance that children need a structure. And they needed that instructional routine to be cell phones in a backpack to the front of the room, because that was a testing procedure. So we don't want phones in kids' hands. So we just used the same procedure, but then we had instructional routines. What was the bell work? The gradual release model, right? That we all talk about. My students now talk about, listen, Langston, we understand this whole teacher does this, then I'm supposed to talk to my neighbor and work through some things, and then I'm supposed to do it by myself. But I need you to tell the teachers, I need more of them to do more practicing before I got to talk to my neighbor. I'm not ready. And they said, we need processing time. And I started laughing and I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, we need the processing time. And so I started to realize the language is getting around the campus. The expectation is there because when kids can now come to my principals, it's a principal advisory council, but I call it the Langston Lunch Bunch. They're talking through, they're seeing consistency, but now they're wanting to take some tweaks. They're like, I can't do 2 problems in math and then work with my neighbor because I don't even know what question I had. I'm still processing. I need 4 problems. Then I can do it with my neighbor because I think I have it by then. I even know what question to ask. So I think routines, even though Stacey's kind of given it that big piece, we also realized in the journey that we were missing things along the way and had to dig into instructional routines as much as behavioral routines.
Yep.
That's so powerful. And I'm so glad you said that, Dina, that the high school is no different than the middle school. It's no different than the elementary when it comes to the effectiveness of procedures and processes and routines and expectations. It lowers the anxiety of everyone coming into a building or classroom. It gives a sense of safety and expectation.
Mm-hmm.
I have Harry Wong's book back here on my shelf. I rotate through a lot of books as somebody who reads a lot of education books, but his is the one I'll never give away. I've given it away, but I always have a copy. And probably my first 4 years of teaching, I read it every single summer. And then as a principal, the question I had to ask was, how do I do this campus wide? And that's exactly what you were describing. I just had this thought that I'm going to say before I ask the next question, but sometimes I think that sometimes we see a lot of mandates that are handed down to schools from districts or states on school practices or behavior. And just as you were saying that, Dina, I was thinking, I think mandates are the results of schools and teachers who don't already have effectual practices, because you don't need a mandate if you already have a practice within your system that anticipates what learners need. And so you guys have established strong relationships. You've established predictable routines. Now let's talk about the rigor, because that's where I think you guys have really taken it to a level of really digging into your data, really making sure that your teachers are teaching to those standards. So let's go there for a few minutes. What is rigor when you think about the high expectations you have for your teachers and student outcomes? What does that look like at Armwood High School?
I think the easiest way for us to define that is we went right into Marzano's content alignment. Content alignment, task alignment. That helped us start shifting teachers pay teachers. That worksheet looks really cute, but it's not aligned to what the kids are going to have. The data dives drove how kids were going to be assessed when it mattered. So that's how we kind of started to show teachers the teacher-made test, and comparing it to what kids were going to be assessed on gave us a lack of clarity about their learning. And so I think that was why the content alignment and task alignment, once we started clarifying what that was, it allowed us to get into standards and not curriculum, right? And so coming from my middle school where we were really into Marzano, it helped us realize, because when I was there, right, I was a point from an F. Like I get to a school, I'm a first year principal and I'm a point from an F, right? Knows, okay, well, obviously what the district was doing wasn't working, so I had to figure out something quickly. And so we really got into standards. But then when I shifted here, right, it's COVID, I'm surely not going to layer one more thing for somebody to learn when they were barely holding on. But I think when we got to that clarity, we were able to hit two things at once. Clarity around the expectation of our observations, our feedback, where we were going to focus. But content alignment, task alignment allowed us to get off of teacher-made tests, having teachers see how things were going to be assessed, whether it was a semester exam, whether it was a state assessment, whether it was an SAT question, an ACT question. Kids have to be exposed to that, because we would find two gaps. Is it a content gap or a procedural gap? Right? Procedure means you didn't even know what the question was asking. So you just hit B or C and went about the day. That's a kid. But you're going to reteach that different than if they really didn't understand the content. And so that was where our maneuvering over the last, for 2 years, like that wasn't one PD session and it's all, pixie dust went out there. Like that was a 2-year process of, I really like this activity. Okay. Can that be an enrichment? Can that be I'm working with these kids over here. These kids can kind of do that. How important is that assignment? That was the hard part for teachers. And that was where, Stacey would really kind of pitch in, because she was fresh out of the classroom. Because when I got here, she was in it, but I needed to tap into her differently. And so that was where that was a 2-year process. So rigor for us, when you come on campus, it's content alignment, task alignment. That's the simple, that's the clarity. It didn't matter if it was a college class, an AP class, an intensive reading class. That was the expectation that helped teachers understand that process.
And I think we also had to be very intentional about clarifying what rigor was. Because if you ask 10 different teachers in 10 different states the definition of rigor, I think at this point everybody's going to give you a different definition, right? So for us, it was, here are some different strategies that Marzano suggests. Here's how you can incorporate using feedback into your classroom. We've even started dabbling in proficiency scales from Marzano, using rubrics. So showing teachers that Rigor wasn't giving kids more work, or giving them more problems. It was really about helping them access grade level standards and grade level materials to help. Where can you close that gap? Here's where they need to be. So what are we doing here to help them? And when that was clarified for teachers, what exactly we meant when we said Rigor's our third category, it really helped them. So now all the instructional work that we're doing with our data dives, with professional learning, with proficiency scales and standard-based learning in the classroom, it's kind of all coming together now. And we're seeing that in how our data is trending.
Well, there was something that you guys said when I was in your presentation. I'm going to quote you, and I can't remember which of you said this, but Stacey, I want to ask you for an example. But you said, one of you said, quote, "I invest in you, the teacher, first, not a program." And,
Yeah.
and what I love about that commitment is you guys have committed to not just building good relationships, identifying good routines, and then saying, raise the rigor. You guys have committed to ongoing professional learning sessions with your teachers to keep them sharp and to help them improve. So talk a little bit, what does that look like for you guys? Because sometimes you do just 30-minute sessions. What does that look like when it comes to the way you're investing in teacher growth?
So that was Miss Langston's quote. And that's one thing that if you ask the teachers on our campus, or even teachers that have worked for her when she taught or when she was a principal at her middle school, is we know that if we're doing what's right for students, that she's got our back no matter what it is. And so I'll tell her every day, like, the way she's able to utilize her funds and make the most of it to help grow teachers, it amazes me. She's just so good at it. So the way this all happened was I decided to go into an ed leadership master's program, and we had to pick one of the principal standards to focus on. And I was like, well, I love professional development. Can I do that? And she said, sure. And so we started doing quick 30-minute lunches where she pays the teacher to come. She pays them for the hour to attend a 30-minute lunch session. My maiden name was Bruton, so we had a fun nickname. It was Breaking It Down with Bruton. So we were just giving teachers quick strategies or quick things that they could tweak in their classroom. Like, literally, they could immediately implement it the next period. And because the teachers that came literally did that, they were like, wow, this works. So then they'd start bringing more and more coworkers to Breaking It Down with Bruton. And that's really how we started our success with professional learning. And so the teachers know that when they come, their time is valued. So that just makes it like even more relevant to them. And we would even have teachers texting us during the next period or sending pictures like, look, I just tweaked my lesson target, or I just tried the vocabulary strategy that you shared and it went great. So by giving teachers things they could immediately implement, and them knowing that they were getting it in-house, so they were getting it from someone who's walked the walk, I think really helped.
Yeah, and I think the other it's practical, right? Teachers don't want to go somewhere and listen for 2, 3, 4 hours. We don't like to do that as principals either, right? Like, we go to a district training and I'm like, oh my God. Then my team laughs. They're like, do you want us to set off an alert so you have to come back to campus? I probably, just in case anybody else, like, no, I think I'm going to try to stay here. But it was just investing. And I think that was just a true message that I said from day one. And nothing will replace a teacher, period. If you need Delta Math, or you're looking to use IXL or Penda, or like you're looking for these things, those are supports, but nothing replaces the value of a teacher.
Amen.
They are the troops on the ground, right? So I think I think when principals and leaders say, I'm all about kids, sure, so is the teacher. But right, without the teacher, we go nowhere. And I think just reminding them how valued they were, and then giving them things that were happening right here. Our same students, our same our demographics, like that same intensive reading teacher can go to the math teacher who's got the same kid, or the science teacher, and we can kind of develop in the house. I think the other thing that was huge for them with professional learning is like sharing the trends of sharing what we saw, and then figuring out how to solve that thing together. Um, Teachers, when they do their evaluations with me, like, what are you looking to grow? Like, what's your goal for next year? What do you want to see in pre-planning? Like, what do you want to see from a PD side of the house? Um, and then when they come back and they see it, right, you build value there, right? Like, so they know that their voice matters. It came down from the intent to return form that teachers filled out. When I went to them and I said, you put this down. I'm like, I didn't see that. Like, I didn't think that you wanted that. And they were like, I never knew somebody read it. Like, before I just and I thought, oh my gosh. So I think valuing that voice builds trust, but I think it takes time, because anytime you do something different, it's scary, and adults don't trust as often as kids, as quick as kids, because we have experiences that make us think different. They think there's this hidden agenda. And that's just the reality, right? So I just feel like it's so important for them to always understand how important their time is, how important it is for me to support them. And they did a video when I just got that award last week that I didn't know was coming. But that for me was the most powerful reward, was hearing how many of the teachers felt supported. And that if I could take something off their plate, we did.
Congratulations.
So I think that's where that PD, it's practical, it's real. Sometimes that PD is really 15 minutes. It's in and down and dirty. And as a teacher, I think that's just valuable. To just, again, it's a tweak. Nobody needed an overhaul. No teacher was a hot mess express. It was quick.
Go
tweak,
try this.
Go.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a summarizer, so I'm going to say a few things, and then as we wrap up, I want to ask you guys a closing question. But Rigor are those high expectations that you guys have set when it comes to your content alignment, your data dives, your standards, not curriculum, the science of learning. Routines are those predictable behaviors for learning that you've established across your entire campus and in every classroom. And relationships are those intentional connections that you've made to make sure that I've built the trust so that people can believe me when I'm trying to help them move to that next level. I know this has not been done without challenge, without resistance, but what's a word of encouragement you would give to a leader who's listening right now who wants to build stronger routines, relationships, and results in their schools?
Be patient. I think we as principals are always so under the gun to move a school, which is why, I jokingly said, even in that training, I know everybody wants to talk about rigor. But you can't get here if you don't have these other two pieces. And I think we skip over them too quickly. And I think one of the slides that even Stacey talked about is, do your teachers feel safe enough to take the risk?
Yeah.
To try something new? But if you don't establish that safe culture, that relationship where the teacher's like, I tried that and it didn't work, and be okay with saying, like, that was a mess. Like, it didn't go the way it was supposed to. Well, did you try it fifth period right after lunch? Because maybe we got to try that second and third period for those experiences. But I think for principals, we're so under the gun for school success and school improvement that I think sometimes we lose sight of the patience that needs to happen to give teachers an opportunity to grow, fall down, and then support them up, right? Like, we tell kids, like, you're not going to be perfect, but we love you up when you make that mistake. Like, we help you. But when it comes to an adult making a mistake, like, we come in heavy and hard. They have to feel safe. So you've got to be patient. You got to love them when they're trying it and it's not working. And you got to be like, well, let me just come in and be a partner in the work. Let me just observe it. But I'm not going to do this observation as like a gotcha. Like, I'm just going to observe because you're the one in the moment, and let's see what we can tweak in that, talk about that to fix that. You can't lose sight of time and its patience that to get this work going, so that you're not playing a game with numbers. I think that's where principals can get caught up in, like, I have to get such and such of a mark in order to get to that next grade, or for my district to do the whatever. you know, patience is critical.
So much wisdom, Dina. Stacey, what about you? What word of encouragement do you give?
I would say start small. So a lot of times, like Dina talked about at the beginning, districts mandate, incoming initiatives. And I think just figuring out how you can tweak that initiative or make it so you start small. Because as teachers, we always feel like here's another thing, here's another thing, here's another thing. And that's really why the Triple R framework works for us, because we don't have new things, right? Everything we just figure out how it goes into one of our 3 R's. And so starting small, pick one area you want to focus on. But talk to your students and talk to your department heads, your teacher leaders, and listen to them, which comes from, having the relationships. But where do they want to start? Where do they want to grow? Because it's not going to happen overnight.
I love it. Well, Dina and Stacey, I know that you two jumped into this conversation right in the middle of a crazy day, right before spring break. And so I want to say thank you for the opportunity to introduce you to Principal Matters listeners. But Principal Matters listeners, as you are listening to this recording, your rigor, your routines, your relationships, those 3 R's, they're the framework that really works in any school. You guys have just been able to articulate that in a way that this is something we hold on to guide the work we do every day with students. And whatever words you choose, listeners, the application here is, and I'm just going to repeat what you just said, be patient with yourself, start small. What's that next thing you can do? Do the next thing. But Stacey and Dina, thank you so much for the opportunity to have you in the room. How can listeners find you if they want to reach out to you or visit your website or connect with you if they're interested in learning more?
Yeah, we're not that fancy to have our own website, but you can definitely send me an email, stacy.james@hcps.net, and we'd be happy to connect with you, and I'll be happy to get you on our calendar.
Well,
yeah, we're on LinkedIn, right?
Oh, yeah,
we're on LinkedIn. We have some of our stuff from our SAMS conference that we did. So we're there. You can catch us on LinkedIn. Stacey's a little bit more techy, it's that age gap thing that I'm working on. But I'm improving. But yeah, they can catch us that way so that we can kind of connect and see if we can support.
Awesome. Well,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll put links to your LinkedIn and to your school website in the show notes. But until next time, thank you guys so much for your commitments to learning. And Principal Matters listeners, thank you for doing what matters, and we'll talk to you again soon. You'll find free resources like this one at williamdparker.com. Subscribe for our free weekly newsletter, which contains bonus material, and also check out the links for Grow Academies, Masterminds, Executive Coaching, and Keynote presentations for my books, as well as from Principal Matters Associates. You can find out more under our speakers tab at williamdparker.com. Thank you for learning together, and thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.